One of my favourite methods on any commercial fishery at this time of year, we're talking springtime, is a maggot line fish short. Simply loose feeding maggots out your hand at 4, 5, 6 metres out from the bank. You catch loads of different variety of fish, roach, carp, F1s. It catches nearly everything that swims in commercial fisheries. These are my top 5 tips for making the most of that area of your peg. So let's start from the beginning and talk about actual bait. Now it's really easy, maggots. What I like to do, go to the tackle shop, get a couple of pints of red and white mixed. Now I think that offers a great variety. Sometimes the fish prefer white, sometimes prefer red. Sometimes what I like to do is just fish a combination of both. A red and a white maggot is often my go-to bait. What I will do though, just because it costs next to nothing, is just get a few pinkies. Ask the tackle shop for half a pint of fluoro pinkies, and these are brilliant for just tipping a single maggot or a double maggot, just to add a slightly different colour to the bait, and that means you can fool some slightly warier fish. So there you go, hook bait options, keep it nice and simple, but those pinkies do make a difference. Now when it comes to rigs, I always think the lighter the better, and today I've got about 4.5 foot of water. I'm using a 4x12 float. It's still got a wire stem, so it's pretty stable. It's got a 1.5mm hollow bristle, which we're using double maggot as a hook bait. I think that's around the perfect diameter tip for that hook bait. What I like to do is dot it right down to just a pimple, so there's minimal resistance there when a fish takes the bait. I've shotted the rig. We've strung out number 11 stots just in the bottom third of the water column. Now we're looking at catching a lot of the fish on or near the bottom, but I still want that slow fall of the hook bait, and that shotting pattern's perfect for that. My last shot is about 8 inches away from the hook, and my hook length is 0.10 millimeter line down to a size 18 hook. Obviously barbless hook to conform with the rules here. I think that's perfect hook size for double maggot. And one thing I will stress, and I've already touched on it, is that strung out pattern. We're constantly loose feeding bait today, so we want our hook bait to be falling through the water in the same way that loose feed is doing, and hopefully you'll catch more fish as a result. Right, let's talk about feeding. Now, to me, this swim, this 5 metre maggot swim, needs feeding throughout the day. It needs building up as the day progresses, and you're looking to build the swim up and hope for a really good last hour, 2 hours of the session. Now, what I like to do, depending on the conditions, depending on how good I expect the fishing to be, is just start out of my hand feeding a few maggots. I'm talking 5, 6 maggots, but you must do this every 30 seconds to a minute. You must keep the bait going in constantly throughout the day. Even if I'm playing a fish, I'll still be feeding. As the day goes on, you'll probably expect to catch some slightly better quality fish. If you're getting pestered by nuisance fish, you've got to start upping the feed. So what I might start doing then is feeding 15, 20 maggots every time, just trying to get a nice amount of bait down to the bottom, get some of it past those roach, those small fish feeding up in the water, and hopefully some bait will then settle on the bottom. Now, what I like to do is vary when I feed, when I lay the rig in. So sometimes I will lay the rig in and then feed, and that's great. But what you've got to appreciate, that when your hook bait reaches the bottom, it's going to reach the bottom much faster than your loose feed, because obviously there's weight on your line, there's those shot on your line. So you've got to appreciate that when you're presenting your hook bait, your loose feed is still going to be sort of mid-water. What it's good to do is feed before you ship out. So feed, put your rig together, ship out, lower your hook bait in straight into that feed. Or, as I just did then, hook a fish and then you feed your bait. So doing it that way, you know that when you present your rig again, hopefully by that time those maggots that you've just fed will be somewhere near the bottom. Maggots take a long while to settle. They're a very light bait, so you're probably looking in a depth of the water we're fishing today, 4 or 5 feet. We're looking at, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds for those maggots to hit the bottom. It's a long time. So by the time you've netted your fish, unhooked it, placed it in the net, That loose feed that I've just chucked in, that's going to be somewhere near the bottom. What I'd like to do is just show you 2 ways of actually presenting the rig into the swim. The first way is to lay the rig out and let it fall on a tight line. Now this is a great way for actually attracting a bite. I always feel that when that hook bait falls on a tight line, it falls much slower. The downside of this is, and hopefully I can show you now, is that you attract the attention of nuisance fish. Small roach and smaller fish like to feed higher up in the water, which means, get rid of that stick, which means that there's more chance of you attracting one of those small fish. There you go. Just as it's settled, we've got a roach. Okay, it's not a bad size, but we want to be catching bigger fish. So I think the best way of presenting the rig into the swim when you've got loads of these small roach around is to dump it into the peg. Now by that I mean ship out to actually where you actually want to fish, and just put your hook bait in straight away and then drop your float right on top of where your hook bait's entered the peg. That way the rig falls super fast, you hopefully escape the attention of any of those smaller fish, and in theory next bite we get, we should be attached to a better fish. That's the theory. Let's hope we can put it into practice. So there you go, dump the rig into the swim, and we're hooked to a better fish already. Nice bream. And to be fair, today I'm catching a lot of F1s. This is the first bream of the day, but what a weight builder. Now if I was in a match situation, that is worth a lot of roach. So there you go, 2 ways of presenting the bait into the swim and 2 totally different results. As in all styles of float fishing, plumbing the depth with this tactic is really important, and especially so because I'm looking for a particular area of my swim to target. What I like to do before the start of any session is whack on a nice heavy plummet. This is 30 gram, means that I get a really positive reading of what's out there. Now what I'm looking for is the bottom of the shelf, where that marginal shelf meets the flat bottom of the lake bed. That's a natural fish holding area, it's where fish naturally patrol, so it makes sense to fish there. It's also usually within range of feeding by hand, which obviously is perfect for this method. So what I like to do, ship out into the open water and find the deepest area of the peg. Today it's 5 foot, out at sort of like 10 to 13 metres. Then I take 6 inch off of that depth from the float. So now I've set my rig at 4'6". I come back a foot at a time on the pole, take a section off, come back until I find that float sits perfectly. That way I know that I'm fishing on the hard bottom. I'm not going to get any problems with the lake fizzing because I'm not fishing on any silt, and I'm also right on that area where those fish naturally patrol and where that loose feed is naturally going to congregate. So there you go, location is vitally important for any method, and especially this method.